Good evening. I'm Barbara Bierstein. I'm chair of the Santa Cruz County Arts Commission. I'm pleased to welcome you all tonight to join us for our 12th annual Artist of the Year celebration. I'd also like to welcome you on behalf of the County Parks, Cultural Services, and Open Space Division, and on behalf of the County Board of Supervisors. The Arts Commission of Santa Cruz County is charged with advising the Board of Supervisors on matters related to the encouragement and coordination of artistic and cultural affairs within the county. Many of you are probably aware of the many programs that we do, including an active public art program which places art in the parks, as well as an exhibition program that is in the County Government Center and other facilities around the county, among other items. The County Commission selects an Artist of the Year each year to bring forth into public view the best examples of high-quality artistic production in our county. Before proceeding with the evening, what I'd like to do is acknowledge other members of the Commission who are here tonight with me to honor our artist. Diana Hendrickson, who represents the 4th District. Diana, if you'd stand, please. And I believe Marcia McDougall is also here from the 3rd District. Marcia? Other members of the Commission include Mary Kay Hubbard and Betty Leonard, as well as myself. The Artist of the Year, the criterion upon which our Commission chooses the artist is based upon identifying an artist who has national and international reputation, who lives here and works here in our community. This artist also must have contributed in some fashion to the cultural enrichment of Santa Cruz County, and we're very pleased this year to honor Adrienne Rich. This year, by honoring Adrienne, what we have done is we are celebrating the diversity and richness of poetic creativity in our community. And we're also honoring the emergence of new voices in poetry. We're very pleased also to highlight poetry and literature to the community throughout Santa Cruz by placing celebratory banners and poetry postcards in libraries and bookstores around the area. I'd like to take a moment also to welcome the students and teachers in the audience tonight who are joining us for what may be a once-in-a-lifetime experience to hear someone of the stature of Adrian Rich, a poet who lives here among us. Fred Keeley, who's chairman of the Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors, I'd like to ask Fred to please join me at this time.
Well, thank you very much. It's indeed a pleasure for me to be here on behalf of the County of Santa Cruz and my colleagues on the Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors to join you in recognizing and appreciating the tremendous contribution that Adrian Rich has made not only to our community, to our state and the nation, and in fact to the world. As was pointed out, the criteria for recognizing the Artist of the Year in Santa Cruz County really is a very high bar. And there have been tremendously talented predecessors to Adrian over the previous 12 years. Tandy Beal and Lou Harrison and Chuck Hilger and Jim Houston, people who have clearly enriched our lives with their tremendous talent. Adrian Rich adds to that. And we are so fortunate in Santa Cruz County to have these tremendously talented artists in our midst, and especially Adrian Rich. It is really a pleasure for me, on behalf of my colleagues on the board, to be able to present a proclamation recognizing and honoring Adrian Rich for her tremendous contribution to Santa Cruz County, to our art and cultural heritage and richness. So Adrian, on behalf of my colleagues on the board, thank you so very much. I know you're not going to come up here now and receive this. I will leave it here for you. So thank you very, very much.
Well, Fred very astutely identified many of our other Artists of the Year, and many of them are sitting in the audience with us tonight. I know Chuck Hilger is here, Doug McClellan, Jack Zajac, Lou Harrison, and others, and I hope that many of you will be able to greet each other after tonight's performance. I'd now like to introduce Henry Mello, who is our state senator. Senator Mello, will you join me, please?
Good evening, and thank you very much for inviting me here tonight and having such a very distinguished person here as Adrienne Rich, that I'll be presenting her a resolution from the state legislature. She's honored us by coming to Watsonville tonight, and also the many poems that she has written, many of which are referred to our beautiful area, and also for her writings about human justice and human dignity. One of her recent books, An Atlas of the Difficult World, won the Los Angeles Times Book Award in Poetry and the Leonora Marshall Nation Award. Other of her well-known works include The Fact of a Door Frame Poems, Woman Born, Motherhood as Experience and Institution. I was interested in seeing just an extract from one of her books of poems, An Atlas of the Difficult World, which describes this area. It says, within 2 miles of the Pacific, rounding this long bay, sheening the light for miles inland, floating its fog through redwood rifts and over strawberry and artichoke fields, his bottomless mind returning always to the same rocks, the same cliffs, with ever-changing words, always the same language. This is where I live now. So Adrienne, it's really a pleasure of mine. I know you're going to not come forward, and I'll just show the audience. You'd have to come up and down 30 or 40 times tonight, but this resolution from the state legislature is a testimony to you for your great contribution to poetry, and as a person who really talks about real life and try to improve our society. So congratulations, and hope you continue to live here and continue the great work you've done.
I'd like to now introduce Eric Schoeck, who's one of our county's most avid readers and a well-known talk show host. He's one of many individuals who nominated Adrienne for this award this year, and I'd like to call upon Eric to join me here at the podium, please.
Thank you.
Good evening. I have to say it's one of the significant honors of my life to have been invited by Adrian Rich to introduce her to you this evening. Well, in one way, it seems like an easy task. There's no pressure. She needs no introduction. But on the other hand, it's not an easy task. It's true that to try to find the words to introduce one of the finest poets of this or any other generation is not an easy thing. It's Adrienne's singular grace to have found the words which must be found, and to have written the truths which are such a part of her life and her vision and her art. We've come tonight to celebrate a truly great artist, a woman who stands for truths truths that I think are very much in need in these troublesome times. I'm highlighting only 4 of these truths. First, Adrian Rich stands for the power of words to make a difference. And by this I mean power in the sense of life and strength. Words matter. They are our chosen means to reflect life, and this is poetry. Secondly, she insists upon clarity of mind, clarity in how these powerful words must be used. Thirdly, she stands for the dignity of human life, dignity of purpose and of existence, dignity which in her poetry I have come to call grace. And lastly, Adrienne Rich stands for community, the wonderful strength of diversity and support which any group of humans must have if we are to flourish and not just survive. As a dear friend of mine's daughter once insisted, all of us is smarter than some of us. It is her call for community which has brought us here to Watsonville for the first time in honoring an Artist of the Year. Yes. It is Adrienne Rich's call to community which brings the wonderful diversity of voices that we are hearing tonight. It is indeed typical of Adrienne Rich that she wants to turn her night of honor into a community celebration. In the wonderful, challenging poetry of Adrienne Rich, this paradox is made clear, that we celebrate our differences as we respect them, and that it is utterly necessary that we human beings cease judging and hurting each other because of our differences. It seems to me that in these days of anger and divisive labels, of hate talk radio, of misguided contracts that many of us never signed, that we need the voice of Adrienne Rich now more than ever. It's said of Winston Churchill that he marshaled the words of the English language together and he marched them off into battle. Well, perhaps the circumstances of his time demanded he do that. But Adrienne Rich has gathered words together for a higher purpose, it seems to me, to breathe life into them with her own vision and insist that poetry, the song of language and of life, reflect our human values and our purpose. In generations to come, our children's children, I am convinced, will read Adrienne Rich because her words in poetry and prose will do for them what it has already done for us, make clear the world and whisper the wonder of life across the ages. Artist of the Year. Quite likely Santa Cruz County has never had an artist of the vision and power, the renown and the acclaim of Adrienne Rich. God willing, we will be so blessed again. Last year's bestowal of the MacArthur Award confirmed what many of us here have known for years, what W.H. Auden saw 45 years ago when he selected Adrienne as the winner of the prestigious Yale Younger Poet Award while she was still in college. From Auden to MacArthur, with her many books and her vision, Adrienne has won just about every award and acclaim possible. If I were to list them here, I would use up all my allotted time just to recite them. And now tonight, Artist of the Year, celebrating her as one of our own, as one of our very best. In her most recent volume of poetry, An Atlas of the Difficult World, Adrienne beautifully portrayed her world in our world here on the Central Coast. The title of that book reflects what it is she believes art can do and what we must do. This is indeed a difficult world that we live in. We need all the support we can find to find our way. The Atlas exists wherever great art exists, but we must navigate our own way. And yet, by tracing the terrain and lighting the way, great writing offers both the powerful insistence that the journey is worthwhile and the hope that safe harbor lies ahead. This is the writing of Adrienne Rich that speaks to me, which demands my participation, which speaks of pain and promise, and telling me that living and the journey is indeed worthwhile. In her latest book, What is Found There, Adrienne articulates this a lot better than I can, so I give you her words about the atlas of work that she offers us. Quote, "A poem can't free us from the struggle for existence, but it can uncover desires and appetites buried under the accumulating emergencies of our lives. The fabricated wants and needs we have had urged on us have accepted as our own. It is not a philosophical or psychological blueprint. It's an instrument for embodied experience. But we seek that experience, or recognize it when it is offered to us, because it reminds us in some way of our need. After that rearousal of desire, the task of acting on that truth, or making love, or meeting other need, is ours." End quote. I must tell you, it's one of the great privileges of my life to have gotten to know Adrienne Rich. Actually, on a personal level, my father, who is a retired English professor, a medievalist and a Renaissance English professor, and as I was saying to someone before tonight's event, doesn't seem to like much of any of the writing of the 20th century, has always had a profound and deep respect for Adrienne Rich. In my 10 years of radio work, he's always been politely supportive. But when I told him the first time, some 4 years ago, that Adrienne Rich was to appear on my program, he was dumbfounded, and I had his respect in a way that I hadn't had before. She speaks in that way to people of all different walks of life, different creeds, different genders, different sexual orientations, different races. That indeed is her power. I've come to know and cherish her fierce integrity, her utter lack of pretense and ego, her genius with words, and her passionate caring for life. It's with great honor I present one of the great map makers of our human experience, Santa Cruz County's Artist of the Year, Adrienne Rich.
Thank you very much. A dos millas del Pacífico, redondeando esta larga bahía, resplandece la luz por millas tierra adentro, flotando su neblina por rajas de sequoia y sobre los campos de fresa y alcachofa. Su mente insondable regresa siempre a las mismas rocas, los mismos farallones, con palabras cambiando constantemente, siempre la misma lengua. Aquí es donde vivo yo ahora. This is where I live now. It is a great honor and privilege, but also a truly joyful and moving occasion for me to have been named Artista del Año in my community by my neighbors and fellow citizens. When Barbara Bierstein called to tell me the news, I was moved on a very personal level. I also knew immediately that I wanted to make this an occasion to celebrate the art of poetry and the creativity that each new immigrant and migrant group has brought to this region, continually enriching our sense of what poetry can sound like, what themes it will take up, what it means to be a poet. For me, poetry is above all a communal art, an art of connectedness. I appreciate the willingness of the 5 other adult poets and 5 student poets to bring their talents and their words to this evening. I want to thank the Santa Cruz County Arts Commission for inaugurating this annual event and supporting it so generously in a time when the arts are often unwelcome guests at the budgetary table. I want to say that in all the planning and organizing for this evening, Liz Lindsley and Lalenia Van in the Arts Commission office have been a joy to work with. knowledgeable, meticulous, and enthusiastic. I am happy that we're meeting tonight in Watsonville in this beautiful new theater. I want to thank Eric Schoeck for his integrity and unflagging humanity as a voice and a presence in this county. I have to thank Julie Olson Edwards and a number of other women, her friends, who became my friends, who, when my partner and I decided we were going to try to move here, helped us in so many ways to find a home here. And I want to thank two people whom I came to know first when they were living in this county, whose love for poetry and language is as great as their passion for justice, Beatriz Lopez Flores and Francisco Alarcón. I can truly say that they have changed my life. There are two people who were indispensable to the planning of this evening, two of this area's finest, most dedicated poet teachers and poetry activists, Patrice Vecchione and Morton Marcus. I'd like to say a few words about each of them, and then each will read a poem of her or his own before introducing the student poets and the guest poets. Patrice Vecchione's poetry has appeared in many literary journals and anthologies. She's a radio host on KUSP. For the past 20 years, she has taught poetry to children in the schools, and she has been the recipient of a California Arts Council teaching grant and a program development grant from the National Commission of Infant Mortality. She is currently designing a program that will bring poetry education to homeless children. Morton Marcus is the author of 7 books, most recently Pages from a Scrapbook of Immigrants, a journal in poems, tracing the history of his Jewish immigrant family. His work has been included in more than 60 anthologies in the United States, Europe, and Australia, and he is co-host of KUSP's weekly poetry show. And now I'm going to turn over this part of the program to Patrice and Mort.
Good evening. I'd like to begin by reading a poem dedicated to my grandmother, Rose Aquilino Vecchione. The sadness I live for. Grandmother's teeth sleep without her in the blue box beside the bathroom sink and greet me in their shiny silence when I stumble across the aging floorboards of grandmother's house. Those porcelain teeth will outlast you, and without you, they cannot speak of traveling across Manhattan by horse, the boy born on the kitchen table, of the babies lost to influenza. I cannot fit those teeth into my own mouth when you are gone, gone. Early summer mornings, you wheel out to the living room, your ancient half-legs covered. Ghost of a woman, you are my only hero. It's breakfast and another television day beside the rumbling air conditioner where I fall asleep in your presence, dreaming of you only 25 years ago, the fine grandma you were, your homemade spaghetti drying on the bed. This year, you will give me maybe one more story, and I will ask for it over and over again. I'll tell you stories of the family I met last summer in the old country, the woman who has Grandpa's very own face, my skin, yours. You'll hand me another string of pearls left over from the thin years of tripe for dinner or a bean soup when you strung beads for money. The fake strand will be longer this year as I am older, more deserving of your gems and the gold-threaded dresses I am too thin to wear. Grandma, you are history alive, and when you are gone, you will be more than my hero. You'll be the end of a world. You will be the sadness I live for. Thank you.
Good evening. One of the main concerns of my last book, Pages from a Scrapbook of Immigrants, is acculturation, or how we fit old world values into the life we live here in the United States. I'm first-generation Russian Jew, and the pressure I received from my grandfather to maintain the old world attitudes was enormous. That's the basis of the poem I'm going to read, The Poet at 30, one of a group of half-comic pieces that marked my progress toward being both a poet and a man. Lubbock, in the poem, is a town in Texas where I received combat training. Lublin is an old Polish town that dates back to medieval times. The poem resolves the problem of acculturation for the boy in the book, that's me, and I chose it because I thought it particularly apt for this evening. The Poet at 30, the middle place. Learn early, boy chick, and learn it good. The world's your face. It's either an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, or turn the other cheek. You got to choose, and choose right. The boy finds the world is a little of both. A tooth for a cheek, an eye for a nose or an ear, and wonders why his grandfather left those features out. The boy's hair gets pulled and combed, his lips get kissed and punched, and no matter how still he sits or stands behind a door, the world rushes in. "Surprise!" yells Uncle Frankie and whirls him in the air. He's got to make a choice. Is it better to give than to receive? Receive what? Pain, of course. Pain's the issue. Do you pass it out to the populace like Joseph bestowing the stored grain, or do you absorb it like a dartboard? Boy chick, the old man shakes his head. You either a winner or a loser in this world. Remember that. There ain't no middle place, which years later is restated as shit or get off the pot by a sergeant from Lubbock. Lublin? Asks his grandfather, leaning out of heaven. No, Lubbock, get back there where you belong. Either or, either or. The choice is a pendulum that swings heavy, razor-edged through his brain, fixing his face in a perpetual grimace. The months peck at his lips, the years beat at the bones in his head, flattening his features until that day when, standing ghastly before the mirror, he discovers the impossible middle place. And in the looking glass of the poem, he begins to redream his face.
We're really lucky that Sam Farr has just flown in and would like to give his few words. So please welcome Sam Farr.
Good evening. Gracias para todo. About a year ago, we were here honoring and opening this center, and at that night, we pointed out that the cradle of creativity now rests in Watsonville. And I'm indeed honored to be asked to come and make special recognition of an individual who represents a field of creativity that I would like to bring honor to. But most of all, I want to honor you, the audience, because everybody who is in the arts knows that without viewers, without participants, without people attending, and without passing on the desire to do that, that we would not have performances. And at a time in the political world, and particularly in Washington, where the interest is in cutting, 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 squeezing, 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 trimming, 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 is that we have developed a congressional attitude that has now knows the price of everything, and I think the value of nothing. So you know that the National Public Broadcasting, the Endowment for the Arts, the Endowment for the Humanities are all under severe attack. And I think the best defense against that attack is to rise up at the local level and support those activities where they occur locally. And I'm very, very excited that you're doing that. The Santa Cruz County Arts Commission has indeed created a national reputation for being a small county that is probably doing far and above its type of contribution to the arts. If you compare counties of this size across the country, you will not see the commitment that has been made here. And that's really a statement for you. And because you have, for the last 12 years, honored and profiled an artist in the community, it's my honor tonight to present a congressional certificate from the Congress of the United States. It's a certificate of special congressional recognition presented to the Santa Cruz Arts Commission 12th Annual Profile Performance for Adrienne Rich, 1995 Artist of the Year, Artista del Año Nuevo 19. 95. Y por eso me da un gran placer a presentarle la certificación de recognición del Congreso de los Estados Unidos para el Artista del Año. Gracias.
We'll next hear from the young poets who will be reading to you this evening. The students reading this evening give testimony to the value of poetry education, which facilitates children in giving voice to their most inner feelings and to the hopes and dreams of their parents and grandparents. The first student we'll hear from this evening is Maimuna Farhat. She says she's been writing a lot of poems recently. She speaks English and Spanish fluently and is currently learning Arabic. Please welcome Maimuna Farhat.
This poem is about my family and their struggle. At the top of my tree are my mother's parents, both trying to survive with 11 kids in a country unfamiliar to them. They work hard, picking in the fields of California, knowing they'll probably be working hard until the day they die. On the other side of my tree, I see my father's parents, in a country where war happens often, not knowing if they or any of their 9 children will die. On a lower branch, I see my mother, in the future, still working hard like she has all her life, but enjoying herself in her garden surrounded by plants. On another branch of my tree, I find my father by his fax machine, struggling to fight the Kuwaitis, who at one point killed his father and brother. In the future, he's growing old, but still trying to do something about the injustice to our family, even though he knows nothing will happen. In the trunk of my tree, I stand, looking up at my grandparents and my parents, admiring them for the way they were and still are, strong. And I'm hoping someday I can be as strong inside as they are.
Azucena Gomez is a freshman at Aromas San Juan High School. She enjoys writing poetry and has lived in California for 11 years.
Where there was fire, ashes are left. Years might pass, new things and new people might go and come. New things we have learned and some we have forgotten, but I'll still remember. Nothing might be the same, it's hard to understand. I'll remember. I know nothing is forever, there's always a beginning and an end. But where there was fire, ashes are left. I'll remember. We have been through thick and thin. We've lost, we've tied, we've won. Destiny brought us together, and now destiny takes us apart. I'll remember. Just the memories live, and year by year that we were together, behind they'll stay. But I'll remember. How can I forget? Where there was fire, ashes are left.
Moo Kim, who is a 6th grader at Galt School in Santa Cruz, has lived in California for 2 years since arriving from Korea. He was unable to be here this evening, and I'll read his poem for him. Among something. Among lonely, I am the sad one, with 10 kinds of sad. Among lonely, I am the unhappy one, with never finished lonely. Among lonely, I am the not happy one, with something inside. Among noise, I am the only one with my fingers in my ears. Among noise, I am the one with tools. Among noise, I am the someone with the broken things. Among sleep, I am the one going to sleep. Among sleep, I am the one going into the dream. Among sleep, I am the one waking up from the dream.
Kimia Yaniko Welch is a junior at Watsonville High. She is aspiring to a career in writing. She is particularly interested in writing science fiction.
Tidewater. When the sun made its weary ascent on the first few years of our current century, a tide similar to those of previous ages began to swell. Its silt-laden waters lapped onto the grimy maroon shores of the East Coast, heralding a flood of featureless, silhouetted beings. They rolled anchorless in the turbulent sea and were deposited face down onto the sand, clutching only prized memories of a faraway country and the tiny hands of their children. The refugees eventually crawled inland, only it was a long, long time before they were able to rise up on both of their legs and remove the stifling, concealing masks that hid their features and their souls. Now, at what could very well be the climax of the 20th century, the tide is rolling in again, bringing home the sturdy cypress and the sagebrush, who were so rudely torn from this their native soil long ago. They are returning, like giant sea turtles who escaped triumphant from greedy hunters. They come back to where they wriggled away, leaving behind the shells of their birth on the warm yellow sand. We as laymen see them on our television screens as faceless beings scrabbling over walls of bureaucracy that our government has created with spools of fine-edged vermilion tape. How can we, in good conscience, call ourselves human when we flatly refuse to accept the humanity of others? I, on my mother's side, am fourth generation, Yonsei. On my father's side, I am also fourth generation. I am the daughter of the children whose grandparents were immigrants, who face the same scorn and prejudice that newcomers are faced with today. Some seek to push them out again, to close the gates behind them, to throw them back to the foam-flecked waves like a fish that does not measure up. But how can anyone be expected to excel when at nearly every turn they are met with harsh, disapproving eyes, cold faces, and the jangling discord of iron fetters that remind them, us, so bitterly how difficult it is to begin again? How can they move on? They are still tied, like a restless old fisherman, to the relentless inborn pull of the surf.
The last student poet we'll hear from this evening is Jose Alvarez. He is an 8th grader at Branciforte Junior High and an avid soccer player. Jose Alvarez.
My tree. At the top of my tree, where the sunlight shines, is my sister. Then down further is where I am. And at the very bottom are my parents. In the roots of my tree are my grandparents. It's a small tree, but it will grow, because like all living things, a tree grows. And someday I will be at the bottom, and then at the roots. Thank you.
This is not in the schedule, but I would like all of the student poets to rise and receive your appreciation. They are our spiritual future. And now to the adults who are our spiritual present. Elba Sanchez, born in Mexico, raised in San Francisco, Elba Rosario Sanchez demonstrated her passionate, far-ranging lyricism in both Spanish and English in her first book, Tallos de Luna, Moonshots. She teaches at the University of California at Santa Cruz.
Buenas noches. I want to say thank you to the poets who have read before me. They are the inspiration and they are our future. Thank you for all your energy and your vision. And I want to say thank you for Adrienne, who is also an inspiration to many of us, for her long-standing fighting spirit, her energy, and her zeal in the goodness, in looking for the goodness for the betterment of others. And to all of you who are here tonight, thank you so much for joining us. I wrote this poem because I feel that what's happening in our cities, in our towns, in our country is very scary. I think we're facing a situation that has similarities in historical contexts. Speaking about the kind of environment where it's very easy to blame and to pinpoint and show the victim, the other, the one who is causing this unrest or malestar. So I wrote this poem called Angel of Fear. El racismo es también una máscara del miedo. Racism is also a mask of fear. Eduardo Galeano. The air thickens around us. I smell fear. Like an angel of death, this fear walks the night, stands beside us, hovers above and spreads its wings, blocking out the sky. We shiver in the cold of this prime evil, fear, hatred. This is the falling angel, feeding hatred into hatred, thirsting for more. This is the fear which rides beneath sheets of blinding white. This angel of fear is coming closer. I hear it stomping, black boots stomping, sound as searing as burnt flesh. This angel of fear presses my heart, grips my throat. This angel of fear so fearlessly knocks at my front door. The next poem is called The Gift of Tongues. And I think that tongues are a gift, and with tongues we can break down walls and we can make changes. And it is very important to be able to hear those voices that are making us conscious of our very present and where we're going in the future. So this is in honor of our tongues. A gift of tongues. This tongue of mine sets fires, licking hot all in its path, scorches the old, announces the new. This tongue of mine breaks through walls, setting free imagery of feelings, odors of dreams, tasting the bitter, the rancid, quenching the thirst. This tongue of mine invents the words, creating familiar signs, draws my days in bold hues, celebrates, affirming my world. This tongue of mine opens wounds, heals the hurt, with warm breath, savors the other, the you that is also me, this tongue of mine. And this last poem es una oda al Chile quien tiene mucho más tiempo de lo que nos imaginamos, al Chile que dio luz e inspiración. A mí me dio mucha inspiración cuando estuve en Nuevo México, porque por donde quiera que iba, yo veía ristras de chile, trenzas colgando por donde quiera de chile, all kinds of chile. And I felt like I was in sacred country, because if you looked at the mountains and you looked at the chile, they kind of look the same and they kind of have that same flavor. It kind of goes through your nose. So, sagrado Dios chilito, adorado por las vitaminas C, cura catarros, cura constipación, cura pulmonía, cura todo. Chile cura todo. So, this is called ristras. Ristras de chile desangrando desde dedos tejabanes, paredes de barro, rojo de chile, corazón en trenzas se despliega. Everywhere chile ristras on roads dusted and brushed with brown and burgundy, layers of dirt, and everywhere chile ristras. Everywhere, aroma of roasting pods, red chile smell, filling the nostrils, taste of green chile, of blue corn tortillas, baskets, bagfuls, exploding red de rojo tierno, tender red, rojo tierra, red earth, lightning rods, red fire de rojo trueno, of red thunder, rojo llanto, red tears, rojo sangre, red fire, rojo, 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 red everywhere, ristras of raw green, waxing to orange across New Mexico skies. Gracias.
Anna Cho was born in Honolulu, grew up in Taiwan, Thailand, Australia, and the United States. Her poems will delight you with their lyric quality. Please welcome Anna Cho.
I am very honored to be participating in this tribute to Adrian Rich. Tonight I'm reading one poem. It takes place in Melbourne, Australia, where I started 4th grade. And as far as I knew, I was the only Asian at my school, as well as in my neighborhood. The poem is titled Out of Breath. Out of breath, Melbourne, Australia. I run home from school, stopping at the end of the block, slowing my breath so mother will not detect I had been running away from 2 boys who had jumped in front of me from behind a parked car. Their fingers slanting their eyes, chanting, Ching Chong Chinaman. I know I am supposed to stand my ground, look at them in a certain way to bring them to their senses. Instead, I started with a skip, then a run towards a dandelion, bent down, plucked it from the grass, all the while feeling the boy's gaze from afar. Slipping in through the back door, I hear mother's voice in the living room, saying, 我们在这儿只是做客. We are here only as guests. 9 years old, and the word guests grinds at my insides. Perhaps unwelcome guests. In bed at night, I worry about how to make myself a more welcome guest, how to be less noticeable, less seen. 6 months in Melbourne, and I finally fall asleep, relieved that we are guests, that someday we will leave. In the morning, walking to school across a park, I spot my footprints in the dewy grass. I tiptoe off the grass and take a longer route around the park. My favorite swings in the distance I will use when no one is here. Watching the mist appear and disappear at each exhale, I see my presence. If I could, I would not use anything that's not mine. But I have to walk to school. This sidewalk I will treat as if covered with silk. Gently, I walk on silk, shoes barely touching the ground, cutting off my breath as I go, sneaking in my breath as I go, looking up ahead at the last uphill climb of the long silk sidewalk. I am already out of breath. Thank you.
Jeff Tagami's first book, October Light, established him as one of the most exciting young poets in the country. He is one of the featured poets in the documentary, The United States of Poetry, to be aired nationally on PBS television this fall. His poems can be found in Breaking the Silence and The Open Boat, Poems from Asian America. Jeff Tagami.
Song of Pajaro. When I first wrote this poem, I never envisioned Pajaro would one day be underwater. But this is dedicated to the people and the children of Pajaro who have suffered a lot. Pajaro, the men lie deep in mud who are cutting cauliflower. The tractor they must depend to pull them out, the catering truck selling hot coffee. Pajaro, the children who clean the mud from their father's boots. They sleep, they wake to the smell of cauliflower growing in fields that are not dreams, fields that begin under their bedroom windows and end in a world they do not know. From the mountains to the river, from the river to the beach. Now Pajaro is tired, it wants to sleep. The packing sheds shut down for the night. The trucks close the trailer doors, and the Southern Pacific leaves town having got what it wanted. This Pajaro of my mother leaving work, who at this moment is crossing the bridge of no lights in her Buick Electra with wings like a huge bird, crossing over the Black River toward home, where she will make the sign of the cross over the cooked rice in the name of the Lord, and prepare for the table a steaming plate of cauliflower. This next and last poem is dedicated to my mother, who's in the audience and sitting out there somewhere. She's a Hawaiian-born Filipina who I picked apples with for a living. This is called Labor of Love. When my mother and I entered the orchard with our ladders, the morning moisture wet everything, the leaves, the apples, the dust that fell on them all night. And then that dust became mud which stuck to our hands and dried when the sun came out. The boss who stopped by earlier in his Jeep reminded us to take our time so as not to bruise the apples they call golden delicious. How you must, with great care, gently rock them into the bin as if putting a sleeping child to bed. It's like a labor of love, he said. Because the apples were the same color as the leaves, a light green, picking was slow, having to reach into a clump of leaves blindly until we felt the smooth globe. Come on out, little darlings, my mother called to them as though they were hiding. I suggested she stick with a short ladder to pick only the ones hanging low. From above, I could keep an eye on her, making sure she planted her ladder firmly in the soft earth, asking her politely to empty her bag before it got too full. It was when I ran out of ladder and I had to climb into the tree that I began singing, hoping this would ease my fear and my mother's fear for me. Careful, she said, careful. I began singing her favorite song, I'm in the mood for love, until I had to stop and ask her for the right words, coaxing her finally to sing along, her sweet voice lifting above the scant chattering of birds in the canyon. Over the canyon, a jetliner lazily headed west, nothing between it and me but blue sky and my black hand poking from the tops of trees and waving, there being so much love in my heart and heaven in my eyes. Thank you.
Born into a family of migrant farm workers, Gabriela Gutierrez Favela has traveled and studied in Eastern and Western Europe, North Africa, and Latin America. She is currently a PhD candidate at Stanford University and co-director of the Cabrillo College Women's Center. Her poems have been published in Europe as well as in the United States. Gabriela Gutierrez Favela.
First of all, I'd like to thank Adrian Rich and everybody who organized this activity. I'm so happy that local talent was brought to this podium, excluding my own, of course. The first poem I'm going to read is called The 12th Commandment by a Mexican Woman. And I'd like to tell you before I start reading it that I really enjoy cooking, and that's not what this is about. This is about how when people, many times when they see a Mexican woman, they expect us to cook or clean for them. And so here I go. When people see me, they always think of food. I wish it were a picture or a paper or even a medal I reminded them of. But all of a sudden, my face turns into a big flour tortilla. My arms, the other tortilla that hugs itself to feed them. And my hands are asparagus and carrots, chiles and cilantro ristras. My butt, papas fritas con huevo. Smelling up the space with food thoughts. My stomach, a molcajete, grinding and blending up the salsa and guacamole for them. The only flower blooming about me is a margarita. My feet, the wine, my toes, the grapes. And as a working, milking, thinking, writing, loving, computing, emailing woman, I say, please don't eat me, I am not a taco. My next two pieces, the first one, they're called my short story poems, and I call them my shoems. And the first one is my red high heels or conversation with my sister, who's somewhere in the audience, my sister Yolanda. And the second one I'm going to read is the plastic book, El Libro de Plástico, and that's in Spanish. So, there were so many beautiful words when I was little. As I grew up, I killed them. Now that I'm all grown up, I mourn them. Like the word anapication they used to say in all English-speaking radio stations. You and I looked for it in the dictionary and couldn't find it. This is a station anapication. We finally thought that anapication was a very beautiful, smart woman with lots of friends. She had all these people saying her name whenever they wanted to please her. We agreed that her name was beautiful enough to say every few hours. You always named your dolls Ana the same day the kings brought them. You woke up before I did and named your yearly doll Ana Pecation Sosa or Ana Pecation Delgado. I never was able to do that because I never woke up before you did on the 6th of January. We were in high school by the time I found out that anapication was not a person or even a thing. It isn't anything that matters. Identification. Identification leaves nothing to desire in your soul. It is a tasteless matter people live with. The same thing happened with our dreams, our dream shoes. They were red and shiny high stiletto heels with beautiful arches. They could be a kiss if you looked at them both from behind at just the right angle, lined up like a mouth. They also reminded us of bright red fresh chilies ready to dry for future enchilada sauces. Our Aunt Chonita looked great in them. She had the nicest legs in the barrio and was a daring woman. Every woman on the block was proud of her because she had no men around to tell her, don't wear those red shoes. They make your legs look too nice. Or take off that lipstick, it's too bright. Or don't cut your hair, you have to wear it long like decent women do, like virgins. Chonita teased her hair and wore her high heels and her red lipstick and kicked her crazy veteran husband out, all in the same day. While she got her 6 girls' ponytails ready for school with the juice of a whole 5 lemons she'd bought the day before for 20 border centavos. We dreamt her shoes many times. I had better dreams than you. One time, I dreamt a ceiling full of red stiletto heels. They all had magnets in the soles so I could arrange them any old way I wanted to in the metal ceiling, while I dreamt of walking the world in them. Your dreams were more effective. You dreamt a man attacked you and that you had poked his eyes out with the heels, remember? You really wanted a pair of red heels in the morning and convinced Mom that those heels were better than army knives or guns for self-defense. We both agreed that their best use was for dancing rancheras and twirling around and around at true Tex-Mex rhythms. My mom preferred to dance el mambo del taconazo with Perez Prado as her music man, and my Aunt Delfina hopped up and down, I think she's here somewhere, to crema batida. Remember how I twirled you the day we borrowed Aunt Chonita's red heels? Remember that cheap hi-fi with the wobbly legs? Mom still enjoys playing records on it. Most of the women I know hardly wear red away from their bodies. Anapication stands in the very corner of our minds, awaiting for our dreams to stop being low and flat, and for our banner to once again be red, like the color that hand glides from our bodies every month. El libro de plástico. Este está dedicado Está dedicado a mi tía Delfina y a mi mamá, que creo que están en la audiencia, este poema en prosa. Mi tía siempre ha pensado que el plástico es la solución de este siglo. Entre más de plástico sea, mejor. Le gustan mucho las telas hechas de poliéster, porque son las que más se acercan al plástico. Hasta huele a plástico, dice ella, cuando uno lo lava. Desde que salió la terlenca en los 70s, ella no se viste de otra cosa. La terlenca es la liberación de la mujer, el fin del planchado, dice mi tía Leonor mientras recoge la ropa del tendedero. Siempre trata de que entre el plástico hasta en su comida. El pollo le encanta. Cuando vuelve de México, al primer lugar que se encamina es a Kentucky Fried Chicken, porque dice que ese pollo sí que sabe a plástico, no como el pollo de Canatlán que le da diarrea a toda la gente. Y es que los americanos son tan, pero tan limpios que si algo no huele a plástico está sucio. Cuando ocurrió el temblor, mi tía estuvo más orgullosa que nunca porque a toda la gente en Watsonville se le quebró la vajilla, menos a ella, porque era de plástico. Entonces me dijo, ya ves, mija, si me hubieras hecho caso cuando te casaste y te dije que compraras vasos de plástico, no tendrías este problema. Se metió a vender piezas de cocina para Tupperware y ganó un montón de dinero aprovechando la desgracia sentimental y los destrozos del 89. Para mi último día de santo, mi tía me regaló un muñeco gigante de plástico. Cuando lloro, él me acaricia, sin que tenga yo que preocuparme por mancharle la camisa o porque no le guste ver a una mujer llorar. Cuando escribo un poema, se lo leo. Cuando quiero tener un hijo, le pongo nombre de niño. Cuando quiero hacer el amor, me escucha. Cuando quiero un amigo, me acaricia con los ojos y con sus manos soñolientas de plástico. Si algún día yo escribo un libro, lo quiero hacer de plástico para que los enamorados puedan llorar sobre él, los niños lo usen como juguete, las abuelas como objeto mágico que roba malos ratos y las mujeres como guarida que no van a salpicar al estar cocinando o lavando los trastes, y sobre todo para que mi tía sepa que yo creo que lo plástico puede ser también lo más bonito, lo más sagrado, y que me crea cuando le digo que el muñeco de plástico que me regaló para mi santo es el mejor hombre que he conocido. Gracias. I'm sorry. Thank you. I took more than 5 minutes.
Final reader in this part of the program. Shirley Ancheta, the mother of 2 small sons, is co-editor of Without Names, an anthology of Filipino-American poets. Her powerful poetic evocations that mix reality and myth have appeared in Dissident Song, a contemporary Asian-American anthology, and are forthcoming this year in several other anthologies. Shirley Ancheta.
I'm very happy and honored to be here with you tonight. The poems and essays of Adrian Rich have been a big influence in my life. I stopped writing many times because I felt that poetry had failed my community. Issues that were important to me in my poems were issues that were not important enough to appear in important literary journals. There is danger in poetry that does not reflect the realities of the communities we are from. Adrian Rich is one of those poets who believes in the possibilities of change through the poem. The poem I'm going to read is A Woman is Taken, and it's for Arlene Suji, who disappeared behind Cabrillo College in 1991 and whose body has not been found. Though her disappearance may be marked with a new silence, it finds its voice here. A woman is taken. I tried to run the other way. Black hair, he said, the feel of it in his mind. But inside him, the lit tongue swelled and his voice grew louder, shouting the body parts he would take from me. And when he tore my lips, my hair, my genitals, I no longer felt him. Yellow leaves fell like the dead wings of moths. For him, the hurting was more. He never saw the light on my body. I knew the silence was mine. Memory is a closed fist, releasing the blood of needless deaths. So the taste remains after the voice leaves its dark mouth. Who hears the voices buried beneath tongues of something cold and not found? It is the same sound we make to release the nightmares in which we are the chased, the choked, the cut ones. The night I entered the trees, I was a voice moving up the trunks of redwood. The branches passed through me like so many arms, sweeping our agonies into this light coming back. Thank you. This next poem is called Taro. It's a poem for my mother. And taro is the staple that most Pacific Islanders use. I guess a good example is poi. Most of the creation myths have the taro root in it, taro. We stand at the sink, silent as cliffs, one watching, one cutting the taro, dark women imagining a place across the water. The first plant is born from a man and woman. He is digging the root with a stone axe and leaving it for the night. She is cutting the stalk and waving goodbye. I think of that woman who enters me from across the long dreams on which the nights bring her, like a blue star pulsing, like that unraveling cord between us, Mother, light upon light. Each word of mine is a light you cannot see, untouched and undone. When we try to speak, you warn of the taro, how we cannot touch it and must wear gloves to avoid the itch, how we mustn't stir the roots as they cook to avoid the needle-like ache in the throat. Your hands that understand taro learn limits whose gestures become far islands to the daughter who wants to forgive. She who wakes inside my sleep, climbs into my voice, is sighing across the fields, is holding her tongue. Thank you.
Now, for the final event of the evening. The great romantic poet Shelley said that the poet was the unacknowledged legislature of mankind. But there are few poets among us who can lay claim to that title. It takes the ability to weave words magically, to be a visionary, to have a strong social and political conscience, and to be blessed with a cliché-piercing intellect. Adrienne Rich fulfills all of those criteria for me. For years, I've thought of her as an inspiration and a complete poet. Tonight, let us rephrase Shelley. We are acknowledging one of the unacknowledged legislatures of man and womankind. The Santa Cruz County Artist of the Year, I give you Adrienne Rich.
Thank you, Morton. Thank you all. I want to thank the other poets who have read tonight. This has been very inspiring for me. And I look forward to hearing all of you on many other occasions in and out of this county. I'm going to begin with a couple of sections from an Atlas of the Difficult World, some of which I think evoke places that are familiar to us all. A dark woman, head bent, listening for something. A woman's voice, a man's voice, or voice of the freeway, night after night, metal streaming down coast, past eucalyptus, cypress, agribusiness empires, the salad bowl of the world, gur of small plains, dusting the strawberries, each berry picked by a hand in close communion, strawberry blood on the wrist, malathion in the throat, communion, the hospital at the edge of the fields, premature slipping from unsafe wombs, the labor and delivery nurse on her break watching planes dusting rows of pickers. Elsewhere, declarations are made. At the sink, rinsing strawberries flocked and gleaming fresh from market, one says, "On the pond this evening is a light finer than my mother's handkerchief, received from her mother, hemmed and initialed by the nuns in Belgium." One says, "I can lie for hours reading and listening to music, but sleep comes hard. I'd rather lie awake and read." One writes, "Mosquitoes pour through the cracks in this cabin's walls. The road in winter is often impassable. I live here so I don't have to go out and act. I'm trying to hold on to my life. It feels like nothing." One says, "I never knew from one day to the next where it was coming from. I had to make my life happen from day to day, every day an emergency. Now I have a house, a job from year to year. What does that make me?" In the writing workshop, a young man's tears wet the frugal beard he's grown to go with his poems, hoping they have redemption stored in their lines, maybe will get him home free. In the classroom, 8-year-old faces are gray. The teacher knows which children have not broken fast that day, remembers the Black Panthers spooning cereal. Within 2 miles of the Pacific, rounding this long bay, sheening the light for miles inland, floating its fog through redwood rifts and over strawberry and artichoke fields, its bottomless mind returning always to the same rocks, the same cliffs, with ever-changing words, always the same language. This is where I live now. If you had known me once, you'd still know me now, though in a different light and life. This is no place you ever knew me. But it would not surprise you to find me here, walking in fog, the sweep of the great ocean eluding me, even the curve of the bay, because, as always, I fix on the land. I am stuck to earth. What I love here is old ranches leaning seaward, low-roofed spreads between rocks, small canyons running through pitched hillsides, live oaks twisted on steepness, the eucalyptus avenue leading to the wrecked homestead, the fog-wreathed, heavy-chested cattle on their blonde hills. I drive inland over roads closed in wet weather, past shacks hunched in the canyons, roads that crawl down into darkness and wind into light, where trucks have crashed and riders of horses tangled to death with low-struck boughs. These are not the roads you knew me by, but the woman driving, walking, watching for life and death is the same. Here is a map of our country. Here is the sea of indifference glazed with salt. This is the haunted river flowing from brow to groin. We dare not taste its water. This is the desert where missiles are planted like corms. This is the breadbasket of 4 closed farms. This is the birthplace of the rockabilly boy. This is the cemetery of the poor who died for democracy. This is a battlefield from a 19th century war. The shrine is famous. This is the sea town of myth and story. When the fishing fleets went bankrupt, here is where the jobs were, on the pier, processing frozen fish sticks, hourly wages, and no shares. These are other battlefields, Centralia, Detroit. Here are the forests primeval, the copper, the silver lodes. These are the suburbs of acquiescence, silence rising fume-like from the streets. This is the capital of money and dolor, whose spires flare up through air inversions, whose bridges are crumbling, whose children are drifting blind alleys, pent between coiled rolls of razor wire. I promised to show you a map, you say, but this is a mural. Then yes, let it be. These are small distinctions. Where do we see it from is the question. And this, thank you. There are some parts of the next section that I'm going to read that I am quoting verbatim from the prison letters of George Jackson, who was imprisoned at Soledad and then later at San Quentin, and whose letters from prison were published in the early 70s under the title Soledad Brother. Soledad, feminine, solitude, loneliness, homesickness, lonely retreat. Winter sun in the rose trees. An old Mexican with a white mustache prunes them back, spraying the cut branches with dormant oil. The old paper bag brown adobe walls stretch apart from the rebuilt mission in their own time. It is lonely here, in the curve of the road, winding through vast brown fields, machine engraved in furrows of relentless precision. In the small chapel, Nuestra Señora de la Soledad dwells in her shallow arch, painted on either side with columns. She is in black lace, crisp as cinders, from head to foot, alone, solitary, homesick, in her lonely retreat. Outside, black olives fall and smash, littering and staining the beaten path. The gravestones of the padres are weights pressing down on the Indian artisans. It is the 6th day of another war. Across the freeway stands another structure from the other side of the mirror. It destroys the logical processes of the mind. A man's thoughts become completely disorganized, madness streaming from every throat, frustrated sounds from the bars, metallic sounds from the walls, the steel trays, iron beds bolted to the wall, the smells, the human waste. to determine how men will behave once they enter prison, it is of first importance to know that prison. From the freeway gun turrets planted like water towers in another garden, outbuildings spaced in winter sun, and the concrete mass beyond, who now writes letters deep inside that cave? If my instructor tells me that the world and its affairs are run as well as they possibly can be, that I am governed by wise and judicious men, that I am free and should be happy, and if, when I leave the instructor's presence and encounter the exact opposite, if I actually sense or see confusion, war, recession, depression, death, and decay, is it not reasonable that I should become perplexed? From 18 to 28 of his years, a young man schools himself, argues, debates, trains, lectures to himself, teaches himself Swahili, Spanish, learns 5 new words of English every day, chain smokes, reads, writes letters. In this college of force, he wrestles bitterness, self-hatred, sexual anger, cures his own nature. 7 of these years in solitary, soledad. But the significant feature of the desperate man reveals itself when he meets other desperate men, directly or vicariously, and he experiences his first kindness, someone to strain with him, to strain to see him as he strains to see himself, someone to understand, someone to accept the regard, the love that desperation forces into hiding. Those feelings that find no expression in desperate times store themselves up in great abundance, ripen, strengthen, and strain the walls of their repository to the utmost. Where the kindred spirit touches this wall, it crumbles. No one responds to kindness, no one is more sensitive to it than the desperate man. And this is the last section of that poem. I know you are reading this poem late before leaving your office, of the one intense yellow lamp spot and the darkening window, in the lassitude of a building faded to quiet long after rush hour. I know you are reading this poem, standing up in a bookstore far from the ocean, on a gray day of early spring, faint flakes driven across the plains, enormous spaces around you. I know you are reading this poem in a room where too much has happened for you to bear, where the bedclothes lie in stagnant coils on the bed and the open valise speaks of flight, but you cannot leave yet. I know you are reading this poem as the underground train loses momentum, and before running up the stairs toward a new kind of love your life has never allowed. I know you are reading this poem by the light of the television screen where soundless images jerk and slide while you wait for the newscast from the Intifada. I know you are reading this poem in a waiting room of eyes met and unmeeting, of identity with strangers. I know you are reading this poem by fluorescent light, in the boredom and fatigue of the young who are counted out, count themselves out at too early an age. I know you are reading this poem through your failing sight, the thick lens enlarging these letters beyond all meaning, yet you read on because even the alphabet is precious. I know you are reading this poem as you pace beside the stove, warming milk, a crying child on your shoulder, a book in your hand, because life is short and you too are thirsty. I know you are reading this poem which is not in your language, guessing at some words while others keep you reading, and I want to know which words they are. I know you are reading this poem listening for something, torn between bitterness and hope, turning back once again to the task you cannot refuse. I know you are reading this poem because there is nothing else left to read, there where you have landed, stripped as you are. Well, today is Earth Day, and so I thought I would read this poem for Earth Day. It's about my neighborhood. And it's called Walking Down the Road. On a clear night in Live Oak, you can see the stars glittering low as from the deck of a frigate. In Live Oak, without pavements, you can walk the fronts of old homesteads, past tattered palms, original rose bushes, thick walnut trees, ghosts of the live oak groves the white men cleared. On a night like this, the old California thickens and bends. The Baja streams out like lava melt. We are no longer the United States. We're a lost piece of Mexico, maybe dreaming the destruction of the Indians, reading the headlines, how the gringos marched into Mexico City, forcing California into the hand of manifest destiny, law following greed. And the pale lies trapped in the flickering boxes here in Live Oak tonight, they too follow. One thing follows on another, that is time. Carmel in its death-infested prettiness, thousands of skeletons stacked in the Camposanto, the spring fouled by the pickaxe, the flag dragged onto the moon, the crystal goblet smashed, grains of the universe flashing their angry tears here in Live Oak. I was very struck by many of the poems read tonight. Elva Sanchez's poem about the angel of fear particularly struck me because I have been writing a lot of poems and doing a lot of thinking and reading and talking with friends, trying to grasp what indeed is happening in our country at this time. And this is a series of short poems called Then or Now. And it has an epigraph, but the epigraph is just the voice of the poet saying, "Is it necessary for me to write obliquely about the situation? Is that what you would have me do?" And the first few poems in this sequence draw on my reading of the letters of the Jewish philosopher Hannah Arendt, written both before and after World War II to her beloved professor Karl Jaspers. Karl Jaspers' wife was Jewish, and for that reason he was forced to flee Germany and lived in Switzerland during the war. Hannah Arendt emigrated to the United States. And the correspondence really begins when they reconnect after the war and are trying to tell each other what has happened in the interim. So this is called Food Packages 1947. Powdered milk, chocolate bars, canned fruit, tea, salamis, aspirin. 4 packages a month to her old professor in Heidelberg and his Jewish wife. Europe is trying to revive an intellectual life, and the widow of the great sociologist needs flour. Europe is trying to revive with the Jews somewhere else. The young ex-philosopher tries to feed her teachers all the way from New York with orders for butter from Denmark, sending dispatches into the fog of the European spirit. I am no longer German. I am a Jew, and the German language was once my home. And this is called Innocence, 1945. The beauty of it was the guilt. It entered us quick schnapps, forked tongue of ice. The guilt made us feel innocent again. We had done nothing while some extreme measures were taken. We drifted. In the Snow Queen's huge ballroom, had dreamed of the whole world and a new pair of skates. But we had suffered too. The miracle was, felt nothing, felt we had done nothing, nothing to do, felt free. And we had suffered too. It was that freedom we craved, cold needle in the bloodstream. Guilt, after all, was a feeling. Sunset, December 1993. Dangerous, of course, to draw parallels, yet more dangerous to write as if there were a steady course, we and our poems protected, the individual life protected, poems and ideas gliding in midair, innocent. I walked out on the deck and every board was luminous with cold dew. It could freeze tonight. Each board is different, of course, but each does gleam wet under a complicated sky, mounds of swollen ink, heavy gray unloading up the coast, a rainbow suddenly and casually unfolding its span. Dangerous not to think how the earth still was in places, while the chimneys shuddered with the first dischargements. Deportations. It's happened already while we were still searching for patterns. A turn of the head toward a long horizontal window overlooking the city to see people being taken, neighbors, vendors, paramedicals, hurried from their porches, their tomato stalls, their auto mechanic arguments, and children from schoolyards. There are far more of the takers away than the taken at this point anyway. Then, dream cut, our house. 4 men walk through the unlatched door, one in light summer wool and silken tie, one in work clothes browned with blood, one with open shirt, a thin thong necklace hasped with silver around his neck, one in shorts, naked, up from the navel. And they have come for us, 2 of us and 4 of them. And I think perhaps they are still human. And I ask them, when do you think this all began? As if trying to distract them from their purpose, as if trying to appeal to a common bond, as if one of them might be you, as if I were practicing for something yet to come. And now, as you read these poems, you whose eyes and hands I love, you whose mouth and eyes I love, you whose words and minds I love, don't think I was trying to state a case or construct a scenery. I tried to listen to the public voice of our time, tried to survey our public space as best I could, tried to remember and stay faithful to details, note precisely how the air moved and where the clock's hands stood and who was in charge of definitions and who stood by receiving them when the name of compassion was changed to the name of guilt, when to feel with a human stranger was declared obsolete. That's from a book that's coming out in September, which is titled Dark Fields of the Republic. And I'm going to read one other poem from that book and then one last short poem. This is called Sending Love. And it's a serious poem, and I had a lot of fun writing it. Sending love. Voice from the grain of the forest bought and condemned, sketched bond in the rock mass, the earthquake sought and threw. Sending love, Molly sends it, Ivan sends it, Kaori sends it to Brian, Irina sends it on pale green aerograms, Abena sends it to Charlie and to Josephine, Arturo sends it, Naomi sends it, Lourdes sends it to Nawal, Walter sends it to Arlene, Abib sends it, Vashti floats it to Ekbal in a paper plane. Bored in the meeting, on a postcard, Yoel scribbles it to Gerhard. Reza, on his email, finds it waiting from Patricia. Mario and Elsie send it to Francisco. Carolina sends it monthly, home with a money order. June seals it with a kiss to Dahlia. May sends it. Montserrat scrawls it to Faiz on a memo. Lenny wires it with roses to Lou, who takes it on his whispery breath. Julia sends it loud and clear. Dagmar brails it to Maureen. Maria Cristina sends it. Mina and Moshe send it. Patrick and Max are always sending it back and forth. And even Shirley, even George are found late after closing, sending it. Wait, there's more. Sending love is harmless, doesn't bind you, can't make you sick. Sending love's expected, precipitous, and wary. Sending love can be carefree. Joaquin knew it, Era knows it. Sending love without heart, well, people do that daily. Terence, years ago, closed the window, wordless. Grace, who always laughed, is leaning her cheek against bulletproof glass, her tears enlarged like scars on a planet. Vivian hangs her raincoat on a hook, turns to the classroom, her love entirely there, supreme. Victor fixes his lens on disappearing faces, caught now, or who will ever see them again. And finally, I'll read this poem called Dreamwood. In the old, scratched, cheap wood of the typing stand, there is a landscape veined which only a child can see, or the child's older self, a woman dreaming when she should be typing the last report of the day. If this were a map, she thinks, a map laid down to memorize because she might be walking it, it shows ridge upon ridge fading into hazed desert, here and there a sign of aquifers and one possible watering hole. If this were a map, it would be the map of the last age of her life, not a map of choices, but a map of variations on the one great choice. It would be the map by which she could see the end of touristic choices, of distances blued and purpled by romance, by which she would recognize that poetry isn't revolution, but a way of knowing why it must come. If this cheap, mass-produced wooden stand from the Brooklyn Union Gas Co., mass-produced yet durable, being here now, is what it is, yet a dream map, so obdurate, so plain, she thinks the material and the dream can join, and that is the poem, and that is the late report. Thank you.
Tonight we have been graced by the startling power of language to bring culture alive, to greet us deeply, to heal the soul. We are blessed to have Adrienne Rich as a member of our community, a deeply generous member of our community, and to have her poetry in our lives. Thank you to the Santa Cruz County Arts Commission and to all the staff of the County Parks Department, Open Spaces, and Cultural Services. And to you, thank you for being such a fine audience. In just a few minutes, the poets will come out to the lobby, and please greet them. Thank you, and good night.